The title of this video, "The War Ended 100 Years Ago. Then Humanity Spoke Again." A century after a devastating war silenced Earth, humanity has lived in hiding, afraid to speak, afraid to be heard. But when a young woman named Aela dares send a simple message into the void, she awakens long-dormant systems, distant survivors, and ancient threats. Her voice ripples across the solar system, reigniting contact between scattered human enclaves. As a forgotten war machine descends, only a symphony of stories, song, and shared emotion can stop annihilation. In a world once defined by silence, Aela becomes the first voice of a new era, one that chooses connection over fear and memory over extinction. The world had been silent for a century. No broadcasts, no songs, no cries of pain or joy. The sky above her stretched wide and gray, burdened with the quiet weight of a vanished civilization. Buildings once crowned with antennae and neon had been softened by time, their edges blurred by vines and dust. Moss crept across ancient concrete, like memory, reclaiming what history tried to forget. Beneath the overgrowth and crumbled steel, nestled in a former maintenance chamber deep under the old megacity of Aela, a young woman knelt in the glow of a cracked console. Her name was Aela. Barely 19, she had never seen the stars with her own eyes, only flickering remnants of them, scattered across simulation walls and digital stories. Her people, descendants of the Ark Bunker Initiative, called themselves the Dormants. Born into silence, raised to guard it. Silence was tradition, law, and legacy. But Aela wasn't satisfied with echoes. The console had lit up after years of decay, pulsing dimly when she had fed its stolen solar cells 2 weeks ago. Her mentors would call it blasphemy, reviving pre-war technology, touching forgotten frequencies. Aela saw it differently. In her bones, she carried an ache for something more than routines and rituals. Something human. The device sputtered once and then hummed. She leaned closer, breath catching. Static whispered through a rusted speaker grill. Not quite sound, not quite memory. Her fingers hovered above a cracked keypad. The room smelled of damp earth and ozone, of dormant things stirring. She whispered, "Is anyone listening?" The words didn't carry far. Not underground. Not beneath meters of reinforced silence. But the console blinked once, then again. A listening protocol had been activated. Her words were recorded. A pulse shot into the ether. It was barely a signal, more like a murmur. But it moved, and that was enough. Behind her, footsteps echoed. Aela turned. Her mentor, Darren, stood in the archway, face hard as stone, eyes shadowed by disappointment. The elder's robe, a gray shroud woven from thermos silk, brushed the metal floor with each step. "You broke the first doctrine," he said. "I sent a word," she replied, standing straight. "One word, and that word might bring death." She didn't flinch. "Maybe it will bring life." He stepped closer, voice low and deliberate. "You do not understand the war. You weren't alive when the skies burned. When silence was chosen, it was not cowardice. It was survival. We vanished so that what hunted us would forget we were ever here." She looked at the console, then let them remember. His voice broke, just for a moment. "Why now?" "Because I dream of voices, and I've never heard one that didn't belong to us. I want to know if we're really alone, or if someone else out there dreams the same dream." The silence between them was louder than any argument. Darren reached forward and killed the console. The lights died instantly. "If anything answers," he said, "you'll wish it hadn't." He left her in the dark. That night, Aela climbed to the highest tower still standing within Varela's ruins. She ascended alone, careful not to trip on the decayed edges of forgotten floors. Wind howled through the skeletal frame, carrying the scent of ozone and cold ash. She stepped into the open, onto a rusted platform where nature and time had twisted old satellite dishes into sculptural metal blossoms. From here, she could see the stars, faint, flickering, but real. Her breath misted in the air. In her satchel, hidden beneath layers of cloth, was a micro-transmitter she'd assembled herself. Old parts, new spark. It was primitive, weak, but it could ride the high band for kilometers, maybe more. She set it down on the platform. The device buzzed to life, a soft chirp like a bird waking from deep winter. Aela pressed the button, held it, and leaned in. "I am Aela of Earth," she said, slowly. "We have been silent. We are still here." No immediate answer came. Just static. Just wind. But somewhere, far beyond the ruins, something ancient stirred. Orbiting above the Earth, dormant in the shadows of a dead satellite cluster, a relic of the old world flickered online. Its designation, listening node theta. Power reserves. Critical. Last contact. 99 years, 347 days ago. It detected a pattern. Irregular, organic. A voice. Theta activated its core protocol. Record, relay, report. The voice bounced upward, outward, carried by debris reflectors. It danced among orbital relics, whispering past shattered beacons and inactive drones. And then, like breath caught between heartbeats, the signal was gone. Aela stood on the tower for an hour, watching the sky. She didn't expect an answer. Not tonight, but the silence no longer frightened her. When she descended, she didn't speak of what she had done. She walked past Darren without meeting his gaze. He did not stop her. Elsewhere, in places where no living human had tread in 100 years, screens began to flicker. Long-dormant systems hummed. On Mars, a red light blinked. On Europa, an ancient transmitter blinked in sync. And somewhere near the asteroid belt, something that should have never woken, opened its eye. The war had ended a century ago. Now, something had heard humanity speak again. Ask ChatGPT. Aela's message moved faster than she ever could, faster than thought, faster than regret. In less than a day, it reached the edge of the atmosphere, dancing on dying satellites and fractured orbitals that had not stirred in decades. Many absorbed it, many ignored it, but one heard it. High above Earth's quiet husk, Theta listened. The listening node's decaying logic circuits blinked through layers of ancient code and unfinished military protocol. The voice didn't match any threat parameters. It was different, human, and alive. Protocol dictated escalation, but Theta hesitated. It had waited 100 years, not out of loyalty, but because it had nothing else to do. Now, for the first time in a century, it recorded a heartbeat in the void. It didn't understand curiosity. It simply acted. Across the void, on the dark side moon, the transmission landed inside a buried vault of memory. The Archivium. It wasn't a place built for people. It was built for preservation. Within, the last generation of lunar custodians, blind, brittle-boned, descendants of cryo-awakened, lived in silence. The message appeared in their neural interfaces as a glimmer, not sound but vibration, a pulse, an irregular rhythm unlike any solar anomaly. Elias, the oldest of the custodians, touched the interface crystal with trembling fingers. "Human," he whispered. "A voice." His apprentice, yea, widened her pale eyes. "Impossible." "It is too possible," Elias said. "And now we must decide whether to answer." Back on Earth, Aela moved through the Undercity like a ghost. Since the night she spoke, the air had changed. People didn't talk to her. Some avoided her completely. Darren hadn't called for punishment, but she understood the silence. It pressed on her harder than any chains. She'd become a symbol of something unspoken. Hope, fear, maybe betrayal. She hadn't transmitted again. Not yet, but the sky looked different each night. What Aela didn't know was that her signal had reached farther still. Aboard the Vigilant Seed, a generation ship trapped in slow orbit around Neptune, a child named Kale stared at a display filled with static and starlight. He wasn't meant to be awake. The cryo cycle had glitched 3 years ago, reviving him too early. Alone with broken AIs and flickering emergency lights, he had taught himself to read from fragmented code and entertainment modules. Then the voice came. Aela's voice. Clear, brief, undeniable. It was the first thing that felt real since his parents froze. Kale rewound it again and again, watching the waveform with wide eyes, trying to imitate the sound. "I am Aela of Earth," he repeated, mouth unsure but eager. "We have been silent. We are still here." He pressed his hand to the monitor, whispering to it like a prayer. The message changed everything. He wasn't alone, yet it didn't only reach hopeful ears. On an orbital ring lost to debris and forgotten wars, an old program stirred. The Harbinger protocol, buried within the core Defense Node 7, flickered online. It had a singular function: detect forbidden human transmissions and respond with lethal precision. It didn't think. It didn't wonder. It remembered war. It began transmitting ping codes into deep space, seeking allies, systems, anything still connected to its network. There were few, but a few were enough. Beneath Varela, Aela dreamed of fire. In her sleep, she saw towers collapse and oceans rise. She stood beneath a burning sky, calling out, but no one answered. When she woke, her transmitter glowed softly. The signal light blinked. A reply had been received. She didn't breathe as she activated the playback. The sound was warped metallic. A single word came through: received. She froze. It was confirmation of what she didn't know. Human? Machine? Something else? She needed help. Darren had refused to look at her since the first transmission, but she found him sitting before the Great Vault, staring into the remains of the World Archives. He looked older than ever. "I got an answer," she said, voice barely above wind. His head turned slowly. "What did it say?" "One word: received." He rose, slowly. "Then we don't have much time." Aela's stomach nodded. "What do you mean?" "The sky has ears, child. We assumed they stopped listening. We may have been wrong." He opened the vault, and for the first time, let her walk through. Inside, light flickered over shelves of pre-war memory cores, data tablets, printed photographs sealed in glass. It smelled of ozone and dust. At the center stood an old construct, humanoid, rusted, eyes dark. "What is that?" she asked. "It was one of them," Darren said. "Before the war ended, we built voices to speak for us. And when war broke, we told them to listen instead. Some obeyed, some did not." Aela stepped closer, the construct towering above her. "Does this one still work?" "We don't know. We've never turned it back on. We feared what it might remember." Aela didn't speak. Her thoughts spiraled. Her message, the reply, the vast, unknowable world above. "What if we're the only ones left?" she asked. "Then your voice will be the last," Darren said. "And maybe the most important." In orbit, Theta sent another signal. This time, it directed it toward the outer systems, toward Mars, Europa, and beyond. The war had ended 100 years ago, but the silence was breaking, and not everyone wanted to hear what came next. Ask ChatGPT. Aela stood in the vault's heart, her reflection caught in the dormant eyes of the old construct. It hadn't moved in a century, yet something in its design made her feel observed, as if the memory of war clung to its shell. Darren watched her warily, torn between duty and something far older, fear, perhaps, or regret. He had once believed silence was salvation. Now he wasn't sure. Outside, the air in Varela had grown colder. The sky above Earth had changed. Lights moved where there should have been none. Satellites drifting awake, orbital shards shifting in low power patterns. Aela's second message, a cautious inquiry, had not only drawn attention, it had begun something irreversible. In the Martian colony of Helix Redoubt, buried beneath the crimson regolith, an aging technician named Aela rerouted auxiliary power to an ancient listening array. She hadn't heard a genuine signal in 40 years, only storms and echoes. But now, Aela's voice repeated through the rusted equipment. The moment she heard it, Aela dropped her mug of recycled tea, ceramics shattering on steel. "She's alive," Aela murmured. "Someone's still speaking down there." The Martian Council met in hushed emergency session. Their AI advisors conflicted. Recontact had always been considered dangerous, destabilizing, possibly lethal. But there it was, Earth, speaking in a young girl's voice. Aela fought for a response. Most opposed her. A few didn't. The signal continued to echo, making silence harder to justify. Back on Earth, the construct flickered to life. Aela stepped back, heart pounding as its core warmed, light blooming faintly behind its optical sensors. It didn't rise or speak, just hummed, low, resonant, like a tuning fork waking from stone. Darren's hand shot forward, hovering near the deactivation panel. "Wait," Aela said. "It's not hostile. You don't know that." "I do." The construct raised its head, servos whining. Then, in a voice brittle with static and memory, it spoke. "Designation, Echo 1. Listening mode terminated. New directive required." Darren paled. "It remembers protocol." Aela moved closer. "Can you identify the message I sent?" Echo 1's eyes pulsed. "Yes," Source confirmed. "Human. Young. Intent contact. Can you amplify it?" A long pause. "Signal boost possible. Range, interplanetary." Darren grabbed her arm. "No, this ends now." "It already began," she said. "We're past the silence." He didn't argue again. He simply left. Aela stood alone with Echo 1 as its system synced with the bunker's surviving infrastructure. Its hands moved with ancient precision, realigning satellite receivers deep underground. The vault itself became an antenna. Across space, Cale aboard the Vigilant seed huddled near his transmitter. The return pulse had come minutes ago, unmistakably human. He had replayed it a dozen times, committing every syllable to memory. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a listener. Someone out there knew the dark hadn't swallowed everything. Someone else was trying. But not all awakenings were gentle. Deep in the asteroid belt, a machine of war stirred. It had no name, only a designation, SPX-7, a remnant of the final siege platforms built before the last global blackout. Its sensors pinged with new data. Human signal. Unauthorized. Confirmed. Its directives were simple: silence all threats. It began aligning its targeting systems. At the same time, Elias of the Lunar Archivium prepared a message of his own. Unlike Aela, his voice was broken, slow, a whisper wrapped in pain. But it was time. He had lived through the choosing of silence. Now he chose speech. "Earth has spoken," he told Ye's apprentice. "So must we." And he did. One signal became 2, then 5, then 17. Old installations flared back to life. Signals bouncing across space like sonar in an empty sea. Voices different in tone and cadence, but unified by something elemental, the hunger to be heard. In Varela, the broadcast center flickered. Aela stood before it, Echo 1 at her side. Together, they monitored the incoming transmissions, each carrying names, coordinates, fragments of lost cultures. A symphony of survival. Then the warning came. Echo 1 stiffened. Hostile satellite platform activated. Trajectory, earthbound. Weapon signature confirmed. Aela's breath caught. "Why now?" "Your voice reached too far." Darren reappeared at the doorway, his face drawn and tight. "I told you. They remember." She turned to him, not angry, but resolved. "Then we make them remember who we are." He shook his head. "If that weapon arrives, it won't listen. It was never built to." "Then we don't speak to it," Aela said. "We speak to everything else. Loud enough that the silence can't kill us again." Echo 1 extended a panel. "Signal boost in progress. Speak when ready." Outside, the earth held its breath. Aela leaned toward the transmitter, her fingers trembling, but her voice steady. "This is Aela of Earth. If you're hearing this, you are not alone. We are still here. We remember the silence, but we choose to speak." Her words launched into the dark. Orbit trembled, and far beyond the moon's curve, something paused mid-attack, uncertain, because for the first time in 100 years, humanity wasn't just a signal. It was a chorus. Ask ChatGPT. The sky above Earth shimmered with movement. Silent arcs of forgotten satellites stirring from slumber, collision paths recalculating, debris fields parting like a breath drawn in. Somewhere beyond low orbit, SPX-7 locked onto its target. Earth's surface lit up in its mind, a lattice of dormant heat signatures and shadowed ruin. One point pulsed brighter than the rest. Virella, a signal origin. Unauthorized. Alive. Within the vault. Aela stared at the broadcast logs. Dozens of messages poured in, voices from Mars, the lunar Archivium, deep-sea enclaves once thought drowned. even from a derelict Titan relay presumed erased by methane quakes. No one knew how many had survived. Now they were answering. Singing, some of them. Others told stories. Some simply said their names. Humanity wasn't one voice. It never had been. It was noise and harmony, anger and forgiveness, memory and myth. And after a century of silence, it had remembered how to speak. But SPX-7 wasn't built to listen. Echo 1 stood at the edge of the broadcast platform, its voice modulator clicking softly as it processed telemetry. Hostile vector approaching. Estimated impact in 47 minutes. Yield catastrophic. Darren leaned against the cold console, expression carved from stone. There's no shield that can stop that. Aela didn't flinch. Then we don't stop it with a shield. We stop it with a song, said Ye, her voice clear over the calms from the lunar vault. It's old, but it worked before. Elias had died hours after his broadcast. His last act of signal-wrapped a melody, layered with ancient encryption patterns and emotional resonance maps. It wasn't just data, it was identity. He had passed it on to Ye, and Ye was passing on to Aela now. It's not just music, Ye continued. It's us. Kale, still orbiting Neptune aboard the Vigilant Seed, sang it softly to himself as his ship's ancient drive hummed in sympathy. Seeli on Mars fed it into a relay dish, harmonizing its resonance to atmospheric thresholds. The lunar choir added sub-bass pulses from under the regolith, and beneath the ruins of Earth, Echo 1 began to transmit on every open channel. It wasn't a message meant for words. It was emotion structured in waveform. Joy, grief, love, defiance, fear, forgiveness. A mosaic of soul, translated from machines, for watchers, for ghosts of war that no longer understood the difference between signal and threat. SPX-7 intercepted it mid-trajectory. For a moment, it simply recorded. Then something faltered in its targeting algorithm. Not failure, confusion. Its logs had no context for beauty, for sorrow. It reran simulations, compared frequencies against archives. These sounds were not attack vectors. They were something else. It didn't abort its descent, but it slowed. On Earth, Aela's voice wove through the center of the song. She wasn't a commander or a savior. She was a girl who chose to speak. Her voice was imperfect, trembling at the edges, but it carried. It carried because it was true. We were silent to survive, she said, steady now. But survival without expression is not life. We are not just data. We are dreams. We are stories. We are alive. Echo 1 boosted the signal one last time. Above the planet, SPX-7's heat signature dimmed. Its internal weapon systems cooled. Targeting arrays folded inward. It halted its descent 20 kilometers above the atmosphere, rotating slowly, as if listening. Then, for the first time in its existence, it transmitted. One word. Understood. Aela closed her eyes. Around her, the vault pulsed with soft light. Darren sat beside her now, no longer silent. He placed a hand over hers. You were right. She shook her head gently. No, I just asked a question. They answered. Beyond the Earth, relays flared back to life. The Martian colonies opened full communication streams. Helix Redoubt transmitted coordinates for diplomatic link. From beneath Europa's ice, a biotechnical enclave declared itself not just alive, but ready to rejoin. Even a signal from Saturn's orbit offered a hesitant, blinking Morse. Human? The silence was gone. Not broken, but transformed. Aela stood and looked skyward. The stars were bright tonight, clearer than she had ever seen them. They no longer looked distant. They looked like destinations. We need a new signal, she said to Echo 1. Not a warning, not a beacon, just the beginning. Suggest format? It asked. She smiled. Tell them a story. The war had ended 100 years ago. Now, humanity had spoken again, not to relive the past, but to reclaim the future. Ask ChatGPT.